Hello, and welcome to the SAF Audiovisual Cast, where we, SAF, connect and share information from top university officials, faculty, and administration directly with SAF students and parents. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the SAFcast, and also Jenny, welcome to some of our first student interviews. So thanks for joining us. Maybe we can start with an introduction. Can you tell us some of the basics? What's your name? Where are you from?
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Jenny, and my Chinese name is Jianing Wang. I come from Hebei Province, China, and now I am a graduate student in University College London.
Okay, now that's great. You're in London, and you've taken some steps in between where you are now and studying, or where you're from in Hubei. Can you take us through maybe where did you do your undergraduate, and also where did you study with SAF?
Okay, I studied in Beijing, and that is called the University of Science and Technology Beijing, and my BA major is Public Administration, and I was an exchange student in UCLA in 2018 with the help of SAF.
Awesome. And just to double check, what are you earning your master's in now in London? What are you studying?
I'm studying digital media creative studies.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. And so you studied at UCLA. Let's talk a little bit about that. Prior to departure, what was the application process like?
Well, I have to make a confession that the application process was quite complicated. You know, on the one hand, I have to hand a lot of forms to my college for the examination and approval of my exchange. And the procedures were very strict. And you know that various departments were intertwined, so I had to go to my department to sign, which took me for a long time. On the other hand, I need to submit my application forms to SAF as well, and the process in this aspect is not so complex. I only need to submit my student certificate, my motivation letter, my GPA, and qualified language score, etc. And I think that my school really encourages every student to seize the opportunity to become the exchange student, whether from home or abroad. And the school even offered some bonus points and scholarships for the students, and I have successfully applied for the overseas scholarship, which could cover 10% of my study expenses.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that the process was difficult for your home university. This was a while ago, but I also studied overseas. I studied in China, and definitely very similar process. Our home universities will always make us fill in lots of forms and paperwork in order to go abroad. Yes. But now you made it to UCLA, and I guess I have some questions on that decision. First, why did you pick UCLA?
In fact, the exchange list provided by SAF or extensive, which includes Columbia University, Cambridge University, and the University of UC Systems. However, the application deadline for each university is different. When I decided to apply for the overseas exchange after a happy and relaxed winter vacation, I found that many applications has already been closed. And for example, the deadline of UC Berkeley was very early. So among the remaining schools, I choose UCLA because UCLA is the best public universities in the United States with a long history and a great location. And you know that as my BA major is public administration, not all universities have courses related to my major. So I finally chose to go to the Laskin School of Public Affairs at UCLA.
Very cool. You mentioned the later application timelines. It seems like that makes a difference, especially when you're on winter break.
Yeah.
So how was your trip to UCLA?
Well, at the very beginning, I was faced with some difficulties because that was my first time to study abroad, and I was not familiar with the educational system. So I even didn't know how to choose courses and how to borrow books. In addition, I thought that I was inferior than the local students, maybe because of my educational background or my language barrier. So I was very stressed at the first months.
You mentioned at first that because of your the style of education from your background, you came in to UCLA thinking maybe you were inferior or you had something lacking, and you said that about your first impression of classes. Did you find that changed over the course of your time studying?
Yes, I have to say that the classes was totally different compared to China, and I found it more flexible, open, and active. Like we have so many activities in class, like the guest speakers, seminars, lectures, and some debate. And I have to say that at the very beginning, I felt scared to speak with people and I was not willing to share my opinions. Although that I have studied English for more than 10 years in China, as long as I step into the real English environment, the situation was totally different. And I felt unaccustomed to it for the first months.
Okay. Yeah, it's something they call culture shock.
Yeah.
Everything being different, huh?
Yes.
So, can I ask you about your first impression outside of school? My understanding is that was your first trip to the United States?
Um, it was not my first trip to United States. However, it was my first time to study abroad for a long time.
Okay. Okay. So, interesting. I actually want to ask you about how things changed in your impression as well. But maybe first, we can hear a little bit about your impression of LA when you arrived outside of school.
Well, LA was a beautiful and a young city, and I want here to mention my dormitory, um, because I think that is a good way for me to experience the American culture or the university culture of United States. Because I felt so fortunate to be assigned to a sorority house, which was just 30 meters away from the college. And it was decorated with the lights and flowers, and it was so lovely. And I shared a dorm with two other girls, one from China and another from Japan. And we became besties after 3 months exchange. And I have to mention that I did not realize that I was catered with 3 meals a day, and the chef was brilliant who could cook so many delicious food, and we also have brunch on every Friday.
Interesting. So let me make sure I hear this right. You were in a sorority house?
Yes.
Okay, so I have some questions there, but maybe we can return. First, you had a chef at the sorority house.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because this is common in some types of university housing, but it's not for everyone. I think maybe some people find it very surprising.
Yeah.
So did you take advantage? Did you ever go out to eat, or did you always eat at the dormitory?
No. Sometimes I will miss the flavor of my country. However,
Certainly.
I think people may have some misunderstandings about Chinese food in the United States, like the orange chicken. That is something we have never had in China.
Okay, let's talk about differences for cultural impressions. You mentioned orange chicken. I told you before we started recording, I lived in China for a long time. I love Chinese food. Now, I love Hebei food and Yue Cai all over, but I also love American Chinese food. And I find it pretty interesting that you mentioned orange chicken because I also like orange chicken. But as a visiting Chinese student, someone who's used to the food you grew up with, what did you think of this American LA style Chinese food?
Well, sometimes you can find good flavor. Also, it is more expensive. But after trying so many Chinese food in LA, I decided to quit, and I decided to cook myself.
Right on. So this is the student journey. You have gone from having a full chef, going out to eat, trying to find what you're looking for, and finally learning to cook Chinese food yourself. This is something I've heard many overseas Chinese students, particularly, have come to do and learn to do well. So now, are you still cooking in London, or do you sometimes find good Chinese food at the restaurants there?
Yes, now I do not have the opportunity to have the chef in my dorm. So I have to cook for myself, but I really miss the flavor in the United States, and I'm not good at cooking.
So sometimes when our students or business people from China will go overseas for a long time, they'll pack a whole suitcase full of instant noodles and things like vinegar or oil. Did you pack a lot of ingredients when you moved to London?
No, I find it's really inconvenient for me to find Chinese stores here in London.
Okay. So you can find everything you're looking for. So let's think a little bit more about that time at UCLA. I think we've got a lot of more ground to cover. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the coursework. Let's start with a favorite. Can you tell us about what your favorite course was at UCLA?
I chose 3 courses in UCLA, and my favorite course is called How Environment Shape Human Behavior, because in that course, I could have the opportunity to analyze some social issues like the juvenile delinquency, the drug abuse, and LGBT growth, which I found quite interesting. And now, some series, I learned at that course was so useful and instrumental, like the bubble door experiment to analyze human behavior. Some series that I can still apply in my graduate study.
Okay, very cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about the classroom environment?
Um, I think it is a really large and bright room, and there is no attendance record in class, which is quite flexible. So I find that it is the first class and the last class that have the largest number of students.
Interesting. So optional attendance, but the most students ever in a class for you.
Mm.
Very cool. And what about coursework? How was the coursework different from what you were used to?
I have to say that the assessment method was different compared to China. You know that in China, it is the final examination that occupied almost all of the scores. However, in the United States, the examination was divided into several different small assignments. So I have to complete some assignment from time to time, but I think it is a good way to learn and help me to consolidate what I have learned in time, and it seems more fair.
Okay. Now, besides studying, what sort of social activities did you take part in?
Yes, apart from studying, I also took several trips in and out LA. Like I visited so many museums like the Getty Center and appreciated the masterpiece, which was something that I could not see in China. And I also took some trips with my friends. What impressed me most was the trip along the West Coast, and we drive our car along the number one highway. And now I really sometimes the scenery can pop into my mind, and I had a dream. One of my dream is to buy a house in Montreal and spend the rest of my life after I retire.
Nice, nice. That sounds wonderful. So lots of day trips or weekend trips. So chances to spend time with friends. Um, did you get a chance to see any sports games at
Uh,
UCLA?
Well, I did not see the sports game in the campus, but I have to admit that UCLA had won championships in so many sport competitions. However, I was fortunate to watch an NBA game that was the 19th game of Wade's career, and it was quite meaningful, and the atmosphere was amazing.
Wow, that sounds pretty cool, except that I'm a Bulls fan, so boo to the Lakers. But very, very cool. Now, I think that we heard a lot about your coursework and your experience. I'm kind of interested in hearing about what life was like when you returned. So let's think about how this experience changed things for you. Did you find that you emotionally or you changed at all after your time in LA, that after you returned?
I have to say that I have accumulated so many good ways to study, like to become more self-disciplined and read more books, because there are so many reading lists in LA. Like we have to read one or two books in a week. So I think I'm more restricted with myself in my study, and also I my English becomes better after I returned back to China. I
So
think
you sound, go
okay.
ahead, excuse me.
I think it has laid a solid foundation for my further study, like my graduate application,
That
which help a lot.
that's what I was going to ask you about next. So it sounds like you're very confident as a speaker, but also that there are some elements of how you study that you really took away from your time at UCLA. Um, how did your initial trip to study with UCLA prepare you for your graduate studies that you're doing now?
Um, you know that after I go to London and start my graduate courses, I found that most of my graduate classmates had overseas exchange experience or long-time study experience. So I find it quite meaningful, and it was a good choice for me to study in UCLA, and it has helped me a lot. Like I have received 2 letters of recommendation from professors in UCLA, and also got good IELTS scores.
Good answer. And it's very encouraging to hear that your time was useful and that it's helped you in your professional and I guess academic career. Now that you've had a moment to let this experience sit in, what thing was the most impactful? Was it the different study styles or your friends or the different people, the culture, the orange chicken?
And there were so many things that I want to mention. You know, the few months spent in Los Angeles have really left a deep impression on me. And sometimes the memory just pop into my mind. And even though now I have started my new studies and live in a new country, I will still miss the time in LA, and I will still keep in touch with my roommate. And I really like the big sorority house and the beautiful neighborhood, the campus, and even the market, like the Target.
Ah, definitely. Well, next, maybe in the future you'll come on a business trip and you can stock up at Target during that time. Fill your suitcases. Anything else you want to say to potential future students?
Whenever you get a chance to become an exchange student, it is worth it, and you will get a whole new experience. It is a good opportunity to broaden your horizon and enable you to quickly adapt and integrate the foreign learning environment, and also a good opportunity for you to prepare for the graduate study.